702.
Health and Wellness.
25 before 12 o'clock on our health and wellness feature this morning, we're discussing dyslexia. October is Dyslexia Awareness Month, the time dedicated to understanding what is really, I think, one of the most common but often misunderstood learning differences. As you know, dyslexia affects reading, spelling, and sometimes writing, and yet it has nothing to do with intelligence. I mean, here in South Africa, where children learn in multiple languages and often face uneven schooling conditions, dyslexia can be difficult to identify and also to offer support. So today I want us to unpack what it looks like in our classrooms, but also how the education system should be responding and what can be done to help learners reach their potential. If you know, or you or anyone close to you has dyslexia, I'd like you to share how they have dealt with that. Maybe you're a teacher and this is something you've had to respond to. I'd like you to call us on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Sairah Rich is a speech and language therapist at Bellavista School who's going to guide us through this conversation. Sairah, thank you so much for making time. Good morning.
Morning, Clement. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you. So there's a common belief that dyslexia, simply means seeing or writing letters backwards. Could you perhaps help us debunk that myth and explain what dyslexia is and what it isn't?
Right, yes. So dyslexia is actually to do with the processing and the sounds of language and then how those carry through into written words and to reading those words. So it's not necessarily seeing letters back to front, but it's how you hear sounds in words and then how you learn to spell them and read them.
And how common is it in South Africa?
It's very common. The stats in South Africa are not as accurate as the world stats, but if we're looking worldwide, we're looking at around about a 7% incidence. So that we'd say about 5 to 10% of children in South Africa actually present with dyslexia. Mm. But as you mentioned at the beginning, it is quite hard to differentiate when we're also dealing with learning in one language and switching in grade 3, or also that there might not be the best instruction in literacy, and differentiate what is actually the learning difficulty versus just how you've been taught.
Are there actually cultural or even language factors that make this condition harder to detect in South African learners?
So the thing is that there is a very strong component and link to language difficulties. So not depending on what your language is, but if you have got a language learning difficulty innate in you, then you are much more likely to then also experience difficulties with literacy going on. And then also if you consider that for some of our learners, they're educated in their mother tongue from grade 1 to 3, and then having to switch to a different phonetic sounding language to English from then on, that is very complex to then translate into reading and writing when you've learned one whole phonetic system in one language and you're having to change to another.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of training then do teachers receive to help them identify and support learners with dyslexia?
So it is quite a complex condition, and it does involve sort of extra understanding and awareness and development, and not all our teachers have got training in that. We are currently trying to spread the word at our training institute and to try and build up training. We actually have got a cohort of teachers coming from the Department of Education from Mpumalanga this week for extra training in dyslexia and special strategies on how to intervene in the classroom. But it is something that's not always covered in the actual usual teaching curriculum because it is quite specialized. Mm. And it is something that we would love to try and get out there so that all teachers can be aware and all families so that we can start to help children as early as possible.
Yeah, so would you say then identifying this much earlier helps in also managing the condition?
Definitely. The earlier, the better. Ideally, if we can provide intervention, and that's extra specialized, specific literacy intervention for learners in the early foundation phase, grade R, grade 1, grade 2, you really can make a difference to their whole learning trajectory from there on. So early identification is the best. You can even start screening in preschool, in nursery school age, looking at children and seeing any children who are struggling with rhyming their words or struggling to syllabify words or clap them out, or, you know what I mean, if you're noticing that they've got a speech difficulty, because that often also then translates later on into having a literacy difficulty. There's quite a strong correlation. You can already then start giving extra support and building them up. And the more you do earlier on, the bigger difference, because otherwise it compounds, almost like compound interest, that the further you go up the academic trajectory into the senior phase, the more of a delay and has been built up, if that makes sense.
Got it. What are some of the early warning signs that parents and the teachers should be aware of, especially from even preschool level, maybe even right through to primary school?
Yeah, so I think at preschool level is what our children are starting to do is they're starting to become more aware of sounds in words. So they start to play with words, they start to rhyme, they're aware of rhyming words. They can hear what the first sound is in a word, and do you know what I mean? And they can syllabify words. So if you notice your child is struggling with that, or as a teacher you notice that in the classroom, you then immediately would say, okay, that's something we need to consider quite strongly. We also have a very strong genetic link with dyslexia. So if you have anyone in your family who has struggled with learning to read or write in their schooling career, it's important to just be aware that that child then has got more of a risk. And then, as I said, anyone who presents with speech problems, so if they've got an articulation error where they battle to say certain sounds and words, it then does often link to later having a difficulty with reading and writing. So those are some of the early warning signs. Once we get into primary school, like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 learners, when we see the child is reading, it's effortful, it's hard work, and it's slower. If they're having a lot of spelling errors, or if they're very, very reluctant to read aloud, that is often some of the warning signs that we need to look at. If they don't know their alphabet with ease, do you know what I mean? Like by grade 2 level, you want your children to be able to, if they see a letter, know the letter's name, know its letter sound, without having to think about it. But if that is still difficult and slow and they're making mistakes inconsistently, then again, we are aware and we must start looking at what extra support we can give. Yeah.
And of course, some families will always say, when we pick up these signs, they're told, just wait and see, or give the child more time to catch up. What would you advise parents who often get told that? Because I would imagine waiting too long actually makes things harder for that child.
Absolutely. So, I think one of the key messages is parents, we need to advocate for our children. And if you're told to wait and see, don't. Wait and see is never going to be in the best interests of the child. We can always do something. We can always start and go, okay, but right now, there's already things that are worrying us. Let's start working on these small things because they all add up and every step leads to the next step in literacy. You need to have your base foundational skills strong. So there might be some people say, oh no, you can only diagnose it as such from this age onwards. But it doesn't matter what intervention you're providing is the same. So even if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you can see this child is struggling with letter sounds or to write. Let's make an effort right away, immediately. So it does mean that some parents might have to advocate quite hard for their children or step up and start doing some things themselves at home, especially in a classroom where the teacher's got 50, 60 learners. Do you know what I mean? It might have to be an onus on a family member saying, okay, let me get whatever help I can, reach out and start doing some stuff myself at home to help my child.
Yeah. All right. 011-883-0702. After the break, I'll take your calls. I'll take your WhatsApps as well on 072-702-1702. We're discussing dyslexia this morning, trying to understand it better on our health and wellness feature. If you perhaps have a child who struggles with this, maybe you struggled with it, how did you manage it? I want you to share your experiences with us. Or maybe you've got some questions for Sairah Rich here. You can just bring them up on the call or send us a voice note on 072-702-1702.
702. Health and Wellness.
14 minutes before 12 o'clock, we're taking your calls on 011-883-0702. Your WhatsApps on 072-702-1702. We're speaking to Sairah Rich, who's a speech and language therapist at Bellavista School if you've got some questions, you've got some inputs, you want to share your experience with us, please do so. There's a message here from Waynard who says, "Hi Clement, I recently realized that I am dyslexic, but at the age of 49, I believe it's because I have English and Afrikaans speaking parents. I speak both Afrikaans and English. I can spell English, but I struggle to spell in Afrikaans." I mean, is it as easy as that, Sairah, to then decide whether or not you do have dyslexia, or are there other things here to consider?
So I don't think it actually has anything to do whether you speak, if you're bilingual or not. In fact, all the research shows that more languages that a child or an adult speaks, the better it is for your linguistic development in your brain. So we actually encourage bilingualism, so it won't be a precursor for dyslexia at all. You might have already had that profile, and that is something that you would have found difficult anyway. It is quite interesting for me that he says that it's more difficult to spell in Afrikaans, because Afrikaans is actually an easier language to spell phonetically than English. English is one of the most complex languages around to spell in, but I suppose it depends on what your schooling was in, and how you were trained, like taught to read and write, and what phonetic system you were taught.
Here's a WhatsApp voice note.
Good morning, Clement, and your guest. I don't know anyone in particular who has dyslexia. However, over the years, I've noted that most actors, whether in the UK or in the USA, they have said that they suffered from dyslexia. So my question to your guest is dyslexia, are people with dyslexia good at creative arts? Thanks, Dima.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Dima. Yeah, Sairah?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that. And it is true, is that dyslexia is just one part of a person, and it has nothing to do with your intelligence. And it is often noted that one of the strengths that people with dyslexia have is creative thinking, innovation, unique ways of doing things. So that is quite interesting that a lot of actors do actually admit that. You also often are very strong verbally because you're having to talk your way around the situation, etc. So that is why acting is a really great area to go into. And another thing that comes out is that because dyslexia involves having to sort of build quite a growth mindset, and that you have to do hard things, you're having to learn to put in a lot more effort to learn to read and write, and a lot more work. You develop resilience and grit and quite a, you know what I mean, strong qualities, which can then really help you, where I think in the acting world you also need a bit of grit and resilience to really become famous and, you know what I mean, to make it in the big time. And it really is one of the skills that you develop, is that ability to have that growth mindset if you are working so hard at it.
When should the parents and the teachers consider seeking a formal assessment? You've spoken about the importance of early intervention.
Yes.
Yeah. So when would you say that, whether you're a parent or a teacher, you should seek that formal assessment, especially when you're not sure?
As soon as you're concerned. I always believe a parent's instinct, and mom knows, and the teachers know as well. You're working with so many children. So as soon as there is a level of concern, if you're looking out for the child's best interest, I would straight away look at doing that assessment. You can look at going to either an educational psychologist who would run a whole battery of formal tests and look at all these different areas, and they could actually diagnose dyslexia. And they might not at first, because the idea is that you might say a child is at risk for dyslexia because they're presenting with quite a lot of literacy difficulties. But until intervention has been put in place, maybe this is something we could, with the right intervention, correct. Do you know what I mean? You could also go and see a speech and language therapist who would do a full comprehensive assessment and find out exactly which underlying areas are needed to support this child. So I just think as soon as there is even an inkling of concern, go and look into it further.
What practical multisensory strategies do you think can be used at home to support a child who's struggling with reading or spelling?
This is my absolute passion. So there is so many great ideas. I think what you have to do as a parent is, if you're at home and you're trying to get those spelling words right, or the list of reading words and the child is struggling, is almost put yourself back in your childhood shoes and think, okay, what did I love doing when I was a kid? So ideas we encourage is, for example, is to go and get, and it doesn't have to be very complex or messy. It can be sometimes simple things like get a paintbrush, dip it in water, and go and write outside on the paving and write the letters nice and big. Then say, okay, we've written the word, say the word is band. We've written it nice and big and we've sounded it out, and all right, let's now go and jump it out and jump each word. And the more senses you use in the body, the more your brain is starting to get a stronger neural connection. So you could say, okay, now we've painted it, we've jumped it out with our body. Now we could even go and write it with some chalk and get a different texture. Now we could go and write it in the sand and feel it in a different way. And the more times you repeat and overlearn, and also different ways you do it, the better the neural connection grows, and the more the child is able to actually take on that and retain it meaningfully, as opposed to just quickly writing it down once. So yeah, get as creative as you can and let the child lead. Often they know what their body needs. They'll say to you, I'm going to jump the word today. Cool, let's jump it. Or I want to write big on the window. If you write with book markers on big windows, it comes straight off. It's awesome. They think it's amazing to write on the windows. So just, try and our best friend these days, ChatGPT, you can pop it in there and say, what suggestions do you have for multi-sensory ways for me to get my child to do his homework? It'll give you a nice long list.
Okay. So, and of course, sometimes we focus on the challenges that come with the condition. But as someone who's dealt with this for some time, what hidden talents or abilities do you often see in dyslexic learners?
I think it's the ability to just keep on trying. And if you think about how much literacy is part of our lives every day in every way, I mean, the essential of grade 1 to 3 is learning to read, and then from then on you're having to use reading to learn. So it's in their faces all day, every day. And if this is hard for you all day, every day, it really is. You learn to that ability to just keep on going, even when it seems so easy for other people, and for you it is so difficult. That absolute inner determination and drive to just keep trying. It's absolutely amazing to work with children when you're working at that level.
Yeah. I want to ask about like the confidence on the children. How do they get affected? And because there's then the importance of the support structure being there from the parents, from the teachers. How do they get affected? Because I think at some point they can see that they are a little different from the other kids.
Especially because it's not affecting their intelligence. So cognitively, they know what's going on. They're understanding it. So they're very aware of the fact that this is difficult for me. You do need a lot of support. I think sometimes learners can feel frustrated, and they actually get cross, and then that can sometimes lead to a behavioral difficulty. And we must remember all behavior is communication. If the child is suddenly acting out, why are they acting out? Maybe it's because they're frustrated at how difficult this is. Sometimes it can be an embarrassment and they avoid the task, which is totally understandable. Self-preservation. If you had to do something that was really hard and you knew there was a high chance you might fail at it, of course you would try and avoid it. You might act out and become a bit like a class clown, or joking around and I don't care about this work because it's easier than doing that than going, actually, I know I'm not going to be able to do it properly. So there's often sometimes avoidance, and there often is low self-esteem and low motivation to continue working so hard if there isn't a lot of support and build-up and belief in the child. And that self-esteem can sometimes be masked, and they might be holding it together so hard at school, and they get home, and often we see this with our children, is they get home and they let it out on their families, because that is your safe space. And that's where you can relax and go, actually, that was so hard today, and become difficult at home or a little bit, irrational, etc. But if you understand the bigger picture of how much you're having to face every day, especially if you're unsupported, it really does put it into context.
Got it. Well, Sairah, thank you so much for making time for us. Or maybe before I even let you go, because I still have about 20 seconds, what do you think that needs to be done from our government and even from our schools? It's Dyslexia Awareness Month. Yes. I do think that there's more that can be done to raise awareness. There's more that can be done to support those that have this condition.
Yes, absolutely. I think the more we can absolutely build up our teachers and give our teachers the knowledge and the tools of how to support children with this, especially in a classroom with 40, 50 learners. Do you know what I mean? And what's interesting is the strategies you would use to help a child with dyslexia, the structured literacy and being able to do things in a multisensory manner will help all children to read. It's not like, oh, you can only use those strategies with dyslexia. They will make all children better readers, and we know our literacy rates are not great in South Africa.
Yeah.
So I think the more that we could focus on equipping our teachers, giving them the skills and the understanding of how to build this up, especially in our preschool and foundation phase, we could make such a difference to all children's reading, but especially supporting our dyslexic learners.
Yeah. Sairah Rich, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, and thank you for the work that you continue to do in the space. Speech and language therapist at Bellavista School, Sairah Rich. It's 3 minutes before 12.